Thank you. Again, welcome to the Dog Park Committee first meeting, and today's date is January 4th, 2017, in the Board of Selectmen's room, and we'll call this meeting to order officially at 6:15. Is anyone in the audience recording? If so, please let us know. No one is recording, so thank you very much. So we've passed out to you a copy of the agenda for this evening. I want to also introduce, again, Amy Contois and our ACO, Doreen Goodrich, our Board of Selectmen Chair. Vice Chair is here right now, and we've discussed, and just to repeat for the audience, we did select all 7 of you by lottery, and we have at least 1 from each precinct, and 2 precincts have 2. We're very excited to be looking to have this committee called together. Amy and I are here tonight as a resource to you and to share some information and kind of get you started. And then if you need us to get anything prior to your meeting to you, just give us a little bit of warning to give us a chance to get it together, and we will make sure that you have what you need for your meeting. If you need to have someone come to the meeting, also just let me know and we can arrange for that to happen. Generally, we let the committees have your meeting. We don't want to interfere. This is your committee. We don't want to influence you or make you feel uncomfortable, but if you want us, we're happy to help. So the purpose of the Dog Park Committee, as you can see in front of you, I passed out the Board of Selectmen votes on December 12th, 2016. The purpose is to review potential locations and conduct a cost analysis of a dog park. And I would add into this that the Board of Selectmen advised that the committee does not consider 12 Upland Street as a site. Also, the other important piece is, we were just talking about this with the town administration, we looked at about 12 sites over the course of the past year. And we did a lot of analysis on those sites. And a couple of sites kind of rose to the top based on criteria of the Stanton Foundation grant, which is the dog park grant that we're looking to get. So some of those sites rose to the top. Those should all be considered again, or some or all of them. It would be up to you, but we want to make sure you know, and the board wants to make sure you know, it's not limited to those sites. We chose those sites internally because they seem to meet the criteria. It doesn't mean there aren't other sites out there. What happens is when a site rises to the top, or 2 or 3 rise to the top, you tend to not look at some of the other ones because those sites met what we needed. But surely, if you can find another site in town, we're happy to have you look at that. And the board would definitely recommend it and encourage it. So just a couple things, and then we'll go through your packet with Amy. As a committee member, as you know from the town clerk, you are all technically municipal employees, so welcome to local government. It's again, it's an exciting process, and I know some of you have been involved in various capacities. Certainly, Mr. Prouty has been very involved. And it's a good process. It's a public process, and that's what we're here for. It's transparent, it's open, it's to have discussions about what's potentially good for the community and what sites might be good for the community. At the end of your mission, your goal, you would be making a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. In this particular instance, the Stanton Foundation grant requires a vote of the Board of Selectmen to support the grant application, so we have to have a site to apply for the grant. So ultimately, you would be presenting to the board either one or maybe, a couple of sites. But I would say you'd have to recommend which one is a priority and present it to the board. Excuse me. As a committee, every committee, and this is in our bylaws as well, you need to vote for a chair. Probably we recommend a vice chair, and in case the chair isn't here, you want somebody to be able to run the meeting, and a secretary to take minutes. So it's required that someone takes minutes and submits them to the town clerk. I believe the bylaw says within 3 weeks, but we clearly understand, if within a reasonable amount of time. We encourage the 3 weeks. Things happen. You're all volunteers. We know you have things, but just keep in mind, within 3-5 weeks, we really should get the minutes into place, especially for a committee like this, which is more of a short-term committee. People may want to see the minutes, so we really encourage that 3-week deadline. So you can talk about that today at your meeting. We'll go through this, and if you want to talk about who might be interested, but on your next meeting would be when you actually take the votes for your chair, vice chair, and secretary. Because under the open meeting law, you have to post when you're taking a vote. So you'll put together an agenda. Generally, the chair submits the agenda to the town clerk. Of course, anyone on the committee can do it on behalf of the chair, as long as we have the agenda. And the agendas have to be posted 48 hours prior to the meeting, not including Saturdays and Sundays. So let's say, for instance, you meet on a Wednesday evening. You would have to post it by Monday prior to the time that you're meeting with the clerk's office. Just to be on the safe side, we recommend doing it a little earlier than that. But if Monday is a holiday, it has to be posted by the prior Friday. So just keep those dates in mind. And your agenda needs to be specific to the point where the public understands what topics you're covering. So you can look at tonight's agenda. It doesn't need to have everything written out extensively, but enough so that someone looking at it will say, oh, I know what they're going to talk about. So on your next agenda, you will want to put on it, vote for chair, vice chair, and secretary. And certainly if you need any advice or any help, don't ever hesitate to call. The other thing that we're going to suggest that you do is tonight is talk about and develop a meeting schedule. We chose tonight ourselves and hoping that everyone can make tonight, but really you're all going to be meeting, so you should all decide what works for you and when the room is available. We have a lot of meetings that go on. We don't have a lot of rooms. We have this room and we have the planning board room, which might be more conducive to you because it's a little smaller and you might be more comfortable in a smaller room. All meetings are open to the public, so you can't close your door per se. The chair does not have to recognize the public to speak if the chair does not want to. If the chair wants to, you can recognize the public. So the chair really does control the meeting. And let me think, as far as meeting logistics go, I would just say you might, because we're hoping this is not fast-tracked to the point where you're not doing a thorough job, but I know there is a concern that we want to get this grant application in, so we don't want to make this as something that has no end date. It's got to be something that everyone agrees you want to try to get it done. Is
there any timeline or hard date in terms of when that funding may not be available?
No, there isn't. It's a rolling application. We are told that when the funds expire, they expire. Right now, there are funds there, but we also know a number of communities are going for the money. So unfortunately, we don't know if the Stanton Foundation, and Amy's going to give you all the details, but we won't know if they're going to refund it, put more money in, or whether that money will go away. So my recommendation would be, at least maybe in the beginning, to at least meet once a month. I know it might be kind of tough. You might want to meet every 3 weeks. Every 2 might be too much for you. Maybe every 3 weeks. But I think you want to try to accomplish as much as you can in as short of a time as you can.
Yeah, I think once a month is suitable for everybody, I would hope.
Again, we leave that to the committee. That's up to the committee. If you do once a month, you may want to have a little bit longer meeting while you're here to try to get more accomplished. So that's up to you. You don't need to come up with a schedule tonight for the rest of your meetings, but we recommend the boards try to find at least the day that while you're all here, get your calendars out and maybe pick the next 2 or 3 meeting dates. Because if you get it in your calendar, it's easier now than trying to do it later, calling everybody. That takes time. Let's see. We talked a little bit about the open meeting law, conflict of interest law. I don't need to say too much. I believe you all had to take, do have to take the test online. That's kind of standard. And the Stanton Foundation. So now what we're going to do is just going to turn to Amy to have her explain to you the Stanton Foundation grant, and then she can give you an overview of all the information that she put in your packets tonight. And then we just wanted to kind of open it up to all of you for questions of us and discussion among yourself of any of the items on here too. So, Amy, do you want to sit up here? Yeah. I relinquished my seat. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Again, my name is Amy Contois. I'm the animal control officer in town. We did put a packet together of some information to kind of give you a jump start into all of the research that we've done into getting a dog park in town over the past close to a year at this point. The first thing that you can find in the packet is information on the Stanton Foundation grant. This is a grant that we found out about a year ago, which kind of jump-started our research into getting a dog park in town. With the Stanton Foundation, there would be up to $250,000 available to the town to create a dog park. 100% of the design phase of that grant is covered, and then 90% of the hard construction costs is paid through the grant. And if you want to flip through, there's about 26 communities currently that have utilized the Stanton Foundation to put a dog park in their community. And again, there are other grants out there, but the Stanton Foundation is specific to Massachusetts. There isn't an extensive application process. Pretty much, if you can create a dog park that matches their criteria, which isn't too stringent, then they will fund your park. The only things that they do require the park to have is there has to be fencing 5 to 8 feet tall around the border to make sure that it's safe and the dogs are contained. The fencing does have to have a double gated entry, so that way there's a second barrier to when the dogs enter the park, so that way there's a lesser chance of the dogs getting loose. The park would have to have shade. The shade can either be natural shade by trees utilizing whatever the landscape of the park already is, or you can build artificial shade, so building structures that will have some kind of roof to it. There has to be water available, so water for the animals, and you can also have water available to people as well. So that does mean whatever parcel of land is chosen, you do need to have water access to that. If there isn't water access already to the parcel, then that is something that has to be considered as well when you're looking at the different properties, because that is a cost that the town would have to incur to bring the water to the parcel. That's something that the foundation doesn't cover in the grant. And then in the packet, there's also information on the grant and how we would go about applying to it. But really, once the parcel of land is chosen, then it would kind of go back to the town administration to apply for the grant. And then the grant, it does have to, the parcel of land does have to be town-owned. All right, and then the next piece of information in the packet is just if anybody here isn't familiar with dog parks, there is some information just on general dog parks, safety, noise, sanitation, location maintenance, type of footing and substrates, and other things like rules. So that's all important things to put into consideration when you're looking at pieces of land, especially in Auburn where it's kind of densely populated. You do have to consider a lot of these because you might have close neighbors to a piece of land that you're looking at. Next in the packet, we have a list of different dog parks in the state of Massachusetts. There are several that are already established around us. Millbury does have a dog park that was created using the Stanton Foundation. Right now, that dog park is limited to Millbury and Sutton residents. In 2017, though, this year they're looking at adding in some out-of-town members to their dog park. North Grafton also has a dog park at the Tufts University. Those are the closest official dog parks. There is also the Boynton Dog Park in Worcester, which is unofficial for now. Oxford is also going through the process of trying to apply for a Stanton Foundation grant. And that just has some general information about these dog parks in Massachusetts if you want to look at any of these as a possible model. Is the name of the park, location, if the park has a user fee, so if they need a membership to go into the park, if it's limited to residents of the town that it's in, and any additional notes and information that we are able to find on those parks. The next thing you can find in your packet is we have a couple maps in town that we wanted to provide you. The first map is a zoning map of town because different zones in towns have different regulations. All of that information can be found in our zoning bylaws. The second map is just general map in town to get a feel for the different areas, with the major landmarks being the roadways and waterways. And then the third map is our map of dogs in town. So these are all the dogs that we know exist in town. Either they have been licensed or we've received a rabies certificate from their vet clinic. Last year we had 2,312 dogs licensed in town, with probably a couple hundred more that weren't licensed. And then the next packet item is the town assessment. So this is the assessment that was done by myself and the planning department of different parcels in town, just to see were they possibly suitable for a dog park. So we did look at Camp Gleason, Granger Cliffs, a 5-acre parcel of land on Leicester Street, Rotary Beach, Julia Bancroft, Town Hall, that's the behind Town Hall. The golf course parking lot, 12 Upland Street, but again, as of now, 12 Upland Street cannot be considered, but we just wanted to give you the information that we used during the assessment. The Pappas Cornfields, the Senior Center, the baseball field at Holstrom Court, and also Lemansky Park. And the Boy Street Tot Lot. So what we looked at during our assessment was there public water? Is there public sewer? Were there bathrooms on the property? Did the property already have large canopy trees that were suitable for shading? Were there any wetlands on the property or nearby? Was the property in ADA compliance? If there was 30,000 square feet available. So the Stanton Foundation, the average size of the parks that have been created with the grant is 37,000 square feet, which is just under an acre. We looked at, was the site close to nearby houses? Was the property currently maintained by DPW? Is there access frontage to a street or roadway? Can emergency vehicles access the site? Was the property currently being used for any other purposes? If there was parking, if there was electricity available, and if there were any other issues, concerns, or site amenities that we noted while we were there. The next packet item is an estimate of costs to maintain a dog park in town. That was something that was, a lot of people had questions about when we first started talking about the dog park. Right now, our best estimate was that annually it would cost about $3,000 to $5,000 for DPW workers to maintain the property. But again, that could fluctuate based on the size of the park, based on landscaping, seasonal factors. In the summer, you're going to need to cut the grass a lot more than you will in late fall. If it's going to be open in the winter, then there'll be plowing of the parking lot and paths in and out. That would need to be done depending on the surface materials. So if you use grass, then grass is going to need to be mowed. If you're using mulch will need to be replaced to keep it sanitary. If you're in a very close-knit neighborhood, there might need to be additional buffers between neighbors and the physical park, so that might be additional costs and maintenance there. So again, the $3,000 to $5,000 is a rough estimate depending on the size of the park, location, and all of that. But generally, looking at about an acre-size park, we're thinking about 2 to 4 hours a week for general maintenance costs. And then the next item in your packet is land with potential for recreational use. This document was created by the Open Space Committee. They have gone through a very large project where they're looking at all of the open space in town, owned by the town, to come up with proposed uses for it. If you have any questions in regards to any of the open parcels in town, you can certainly ask us, or you could also speak with members of the Open Space Committee as well.
And I just want to mention, if I can jump in, the Open Space Committee hasn't voted on this yet. That's why you see it is marked draft. They're still, spent a lot of analysis, and they're still looking at a lot of different things, but this is, it was just not voted on, but we thought it would be helpful to have it, even though it's not complete.
Thank you.
And the last item in your packet is just, it's a dimensional regulation table taken from our zoning bylaws, just to give you a little information about setbacks that would be required. So setbacks from neighboring properties, setbacks from the road, and things like that, that you will have to consider when you're recommending a parcel in town. Does anybody have any questions about any of the packet items, or?
I do. I have one. I just want to clarify something. If it's decided to have a usage fee, would those fees go towards covering the maintenance costs? I would think. I just want to make sure.
Yes. We have talked about if there was a fee, it would go toward whatever the annual maintenance costs are. It likely wouldn't cover all of them, but it would certainly offset.
Okay, great.
I also have a question regarding cost. What do the current dog license fees go to right now?
What does the money?
Right.
Yeah, I believe that goes into the general fund.
And then what we do is, even though it goes into the general fund, we were able to hire a full-time animal control officer because of the license fees that we collect.
And then that also does go back and support the Kathy Sabina Animal Compound, where we house the animals that are picked up in town, so strays or owned animals that happen to get out, or injured animals that are picked up.
Okay, thank you.
And Amy did a great job on this thing.
Thank you so much.
I also want to just point out, because we've been asked a lot, and I know the Board of Selectmen has been about the matching grant to the Stanton Foundation. So there is, they cover 100% of
The design.
design, but 90% of the construction. So the question has come to us and to many of the board members, what about the other 10%? And while the board has heard an overwhelming amount of support for a dog park, they've also heard quite a few people contacting them, telling them they're in favor of dog park, but not if there's any taxpayer dollars going into it. So the concern is, where's the 10% coming from? Will there be a cost to the taxpayer? And will there be an ongoing maintenance cost to the taxpayer if there's a dog park? So fortunately for the town of Auburn, there is a group called the Fur Friends. I believe, Nicole, you're a member of the Fur Friends, and others. Okay. Yeah. And the Fur Friends has committed to the Board of Selectmen and to me that they are willing and will be raising the 10% match required for this grant. So we are so grateful. Just want to make it clear. So with that, there would be no taxpayer dollars that would go into this beyond the maintenance. And again, with the maintenance, the Fur Friends have also agreed to help raise money for the maintenance of the park. Will there never be any dollars spent? I don't want to say that. We don't know that yet. Down the road, we maintain all of our parks in town. The town does. They're beautiful facilities. But if we can offset those costs with donations from the Fur Friends, we would be thrilled. And we just want to put that out there for you so that you understand the finances of this and some of the things to look at.
That's great. Thanks.
Thank you.
I have a question with respect to kind of how we got here. I just want to make sure that we're all kind of baseline. So obviously there's a fair amount of work that's already gone into trying to understand options and trade-offs and upsides, downsides. Can someone just kind of state as to why we kind of went forward with the dog committee after we got all this information? I mean, to me, there had to be some concerns or something that wasn't done perhaps in the right manner that then led to this. So if somebody could kind of highlight what that was and then what maybe the top 3 concerns were that came out of that effort, that'd be appreciated.
I'm going to speak from here. I was asked to do this so the public could hear this. Yes, the town administration put a lot of work into this, and this was clearly something that we felt and we had heard that a number of members of the community wanted to have a dog park. When we did make the recommendation to the Board of Selectmen for a particular site at 12 Upland Street, there was a lot of concern from the residents, and they did not want to have that dog park in that particular location. So the Board of Selectmen, to make sure that everybody understood this is a transparent process, this is a public process, recommended that we put together a dog park committee of residents to look at the sites. So there were no concerns that and I will tell you this did not happen, but some did feel that the town administration seemed to have a certain place that they wanted to put the park. We did not. We wanted to put the park where it works, not, and we didn't know where that was going to be until we did our analysis. So by bringing in all of you as residents, you can take a fresh look at it, maybe see something a town administration didn't see, maybe see a site that turns out to be a great site that we didn't see. So it's just bringing more eyes and more people into the process, opening it up to be a public process, and allowing people to see how these things unfold. That, we're not throwing darts at a board to choose a site. There's a lot of work that goes into this type of analysis. So we are firm believers, town administration, myself, the Board of Selectmen, that the more people that you engage in the process and the more stakeholders, the more support you have for a project. It shows the public that you're doing your due diligence, you're thinking things through, you're looking at all aspects of it, you're listening to concerns of the public, and you're addressing it when you make your recommendation. And we want to ensure that people understand we did that as a town administration, but now that site didn't work, and that's fine, but let's move forward. Let's do something, again, let's try to find another site and let's do it together. So that was the intent of putting the committee together from the Board of Selectmen. So with that being said, I think there's a couple of things that you could potentially discuss tonight, and that would be just start thinking if any of you would not want to be considered for chair or vice chair, you might want to mention that tonight. If you would like to be considered, you might want to mention it. Again, you can't have the vote tonight because it hasn't been posted, but you might want to have a little discussion about, who's willing to take it on, who's willing to take on the minutes. Also, again, you might want to talk about your schedule, how often, talk about, is it monthly, is it bi-monthly, is it twice monthly, whatever you decide. And then whatever you do decide, we'll have to work with you with the clerk's office to make sure we get you a room that's available. I can tell you Monday nights are tough to get a room. We have several meetings meet on Monday nights because we're open until 7. So we try to maximize the use of town administration and all the employees. They're here anyway till 7, so that's when we have a lot of committee meetings. So that's a tough night to get a room. It is a little bit of a juggle with all of the boards and committees getting a room, but if you can kind of come up with the nights that you prefer to meet and the time, we can certainly work with the clerk's office to see what room is available. I would also say if this room isn't available, or the planning board room, and a certain night works for you, we'll work to find you another location. You could potentially meet at the police station has a community room. As long as it's a public room and open to the public, you can have a meeting there. So we'll work with you to find another spot if this doesn't work out. So you might want to talk about that now as far as the chair and a schedule. And again, after tonight, Amy and I will step back. We'll allow the committee to go forward and have your discussions and just let us know if we can help. We did provide all this information to you just so you wouldn't be starting from scratch. A lot of the research has been done, but again, there were sites that we did not look at that you may want to look at. And some of the sites we removed from consideration, and I'll tell you the two early on that got removed was the Mary G. Stone School right here behind us at Town Hall and the Julia Bancroft site. Those should definitely be back in. They were removed because we had an advisory committee looking at the disposition of the two schools, and we were waiting to see how we were going to proceed with that, and we have decided to RFP the schools on the lot that the school sits on with the parking immediately around it, and preserve and keep as under town ownership the playgrounds that are behind them. So they are still town property. The neighborhood, the advisory committee did want to keep it as a playground. It doesn't mean it couldn't be considered if there was a part of it, but initially we thought if there's a better site, why look at it when it's already been indicated to us that the neighbors really wanted to keep that as a playground. We didn't want to take a playground away, and if we did, we'd want to be replacing it somewhere else. So that is one of the reasons that one was taken off. Again, you can look at it again, but wanted to let you know why that didn't proceed. There was a lot of discussion at previous meetings with residents who said that they wanted to keep that as a playground. They're both highly used for especially the younger children for some of the sports, because some of the other fields seem to get tied up with the leagues a lot. So some of the less populated leagues are, and the smaller children are using those particular fields. So if you have any questions, and you may through the process, if you want to get them to us in advance of your meeting, we can get you the answer. So at your next meeting, you'll be able to talk about it. For instance, if you have a concern about, you've decided to look at another parcel and you want to know if there's infrastructure there or what the setbacks are, just let us know. We'll find out for you and get back to you. I'm leaving the podium now.
Julie, before you leave the podium, is there an advantage to our choosing a site that already has infrastructure? Some of these, as I look through those sites, some of them you're just starting from scratch. You're just a piece of muddy ground.
Absolutely.
And others are already maintained by the Parks Department and have water, for example, available.
Yes, absolutely, Ron. Through our analysis, we looked at some sites that seemed like they may be a good site, but you needed to bring a road in, or you needed to put in a parking lot, or the topography was such that it would be a multi-level site, and you have to have handicapped accessibility. So if the site was multi-level, you can't have stairs going down because you need to have handicapped accessibility. So that really increases your cost to have to put in a ramp, depending on the length of the ramp, because you've got to make sure the ramp only follows a certain angle. So certain sites became very expensive, and there was one site that didn't have roadway access. If you need any kind of liens or anything like that, it adds to the cost. And the grant doesn't pay for that. The grant pays for the building of the dog park. So anything that has to be done by the town will add to the cost. We looked at a couple of sites that it didn't have any infrastructure. They had no water, no sewer. And we looked at it first and said, what a great spot. And then when you think of that, you've got to bring in the water, and is there going to be the other infrastructure that you need. Some of the sites, there were many reasons that some of the sites were taken out, Ron, but one of them truly was the cost of not having the infrastructure. And it also it's not that it would delay the process, but if you have to then go look at how are you going to get that infrastructure, how are you going to fund that infrastructure, now you've added taxpayer dollars, and that's something that the board has heard loud and clear from people that they didn't want this to cost a lot of money. Sure. Anyone else? Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I should mention, and one of the reasons Doreen Goodrich is here tonight is the board had said that there would be a non-voting member of the Board of Selectmen who would attend the meetings, just be here as a liaison, and come back and report to the board on how the committee is doing. And that member's going to, apparently it's going to be on the agenda Monday night for the board to choose a member to be the liaison. So it's a good thing, because then if anyone has any questions of the board and what might be going on that level, there'd be somebody here from the Board of Selectmen. So what are your thoughts on meeting dates? What day of the week works for you as a group?
On the committees that I've been on, Monday was a nice night, but you always had trouble with getting postings, particularly when you didn't have a full-time secretary, because you've got that weekend. And you've got to remember to do a lot of that stuff Friday, and if you forget on Friday, then you often run into situations where you can't legally hold a meeting on Monday. So I'd say that for a committee like this, middle of the week
Wednesday is a good
probably
day.
better. Yeah,
Wednesday night is a great
I
night
would
for
say
me.
either Tuesday or Wednesday would probably be the best night, since Monday is the busiest night and is the hardest night to get a room.
Yeah.
I'd say either Tuesday or Wednesday, something in the
Anyone
middle.
else? Is
It
it
was Wednesday.
Wednesdays are better.
Wednesday? All right, why don't we look, then it seems like the majority Wednesday. What we can do, and then we can report back to you, is we can find out what Wednesdays are available coming up.
Yeah.
And maybe just give you a whole list at for your next meeting.
Right.
And then you can decide what Wednesdays you want to meet. How's that?
Great.
So we'll get a list to you. Well, we also have master plan committee and zoning bylaw review committee in that room. Yeah. And conservation. Yeah, there's a number of different meetings going on. We'll have to check. I don't know what else is, but we should be able to work something out. Yep. And again, to Doreen's point, it may not be that room, which is a little smaller. It may have to be this room, but and I know it seems so big when you have a smaller group, but really, if you're the only ones in here, it's a nice room to meet in. All right, so we'll check on that and we'll get back to you. And as far as committee, chair, vice chair, secretary, you should probably discuss, if anyone's interested in being the chair or the vice chair, and at the next meeting, that person can be nominated. At least you can have that discussion and start thinking about it. If somebody really doesn't want to do it, you should probably speak up and say, don't put me in there.
Can I maybe make a suggestion? Before anyone, I guess, raises their hand, can you provide a little visibility into type of the roles within the committee? Because what I'm trying to get my head around is, time commitment. I see some requirements here. I see some deliverables here. I kind of feel that it's an open-ended schedule, right? Which obviously, if it is an open-ended schedule, then meeting once a month isn't going to get us anywhere anytime quick. So I'm trying to get a sense of what's the overall lay of the land here that we're operating, and maybe getting some insight from your past experience working with other committees as to kind of how does the committee get off the ground, and trying to help level set expectations so that we're all kind of aligned from that perspective.
Yep, no, that's great. From town administration's perspective, we would like to have a recommendation, if possible, within the next 3 to 4 months.
And that would almost require meeting more than once.
It
I would
does.
say we can't meet once a month and get an
Meet at
answer
least
like
twice a
that.
month.
Yeah.
Because if someone misses a meeting,
Yeah.
that's 2 months that person is gone and out of touch with the committee.
So while that would be ideal, we don't want to dictate to you how many times a month that all of you can meet. Ideally, within 4 months, we'd like to have a recommendation going back to the Board of Selectmen so that we can get this grant application
So
going.
that's why I kind of reverse engineer into this, right? From the standpoint of what's the list of things we've got to come up with, how is the work and evaluation and assessment going to be divvied up, and then that starts giving you a sense of when you might get a timeline together that seems reasonable and practical that you can actually stand behind and say we could actually meet. So it seems at this point, I don't know if we're there yet, because obviously this is the first time we've gotten this data dump, and I'm sure none of us have really seen it or digested it, but it kind of makes sense to me that we need to get a better sense of kind of what the scope is of what we've got here, and then come together as to, okay, what are our thoughts on the go-forward plan, and what the roles are that we see coming out of this. Just like a question I have is, we have all these sites, and we have these requirements as to what a site might need to have. Are we expected or to go out and make site visits, right? Because does that mean we all have to be there to actually see that there's shade, somewhere in the ground? Because I can't imagine that if you were to pull something from the Open Space Committee, that they could necessarily have some of those parameters readily available. Some of them maybe in terms of dimensions and things of that sort, I could see being available, but some of these more specific items, I'm not really sure that I bet my house on it. That's something that we have. So just again, trying to get a sense of kind of what the effort is in order to kind of then say, okay, now that we understand the effort, and then we can start put together our own plan on how we move forward.
And what's already been done, okay? A lot of this has already been done, so what's already been done that we can use,
Exactly.
okay? Why spin your wheels and why do this, why create it all over again when a lot of this has been done by a lot of people that put work into it, so.
My recommendation would be to look at the sites that have already been evaluated and to revisit all but for the 12 Upland Street, look at them all again, look at the work that's already been done, and take a look and see if there's anything in addition that should be looked at. I always recommend a site visit. It does not have to be done as a group. It probably can't be done as a group. It's too impossible to get you together. You know, if maybe you assign, maybe there are 12 sites, and everyone volunteers to go look at 1 or 2 of them,
Right.
and then report back at the next meeting and say, these are the 2 I went and looked
Right.
at.
Have a list of criteria
Yeah.
that we need to be looking at when we go
Priorities.
there.
We wanna
Right, and say,
establish
okay, we have
priorities
this,
as
we
a
have this, but we
committee.
don't have that.
I would revisit all of the sites that we looked at. Number one, I'd start with that. And looking again, you're going to want to look at density, you know, how close are the houses when you actually go out there. If you look at the maps, you know, if you look online,
It's not as easy.
it's, you know, sometimes you can say, oh, that looks like that house is farther away. It may not be. You may walk out there and go, whoa, that house is right there. So you probably do want to physically see these sites. So that I'd recommend looking at the sites that have already been looked at. Again, there's additional work that can be done. You can revisit it again, because some of these sites were taken off the list, as I mentioned, 2 of them, for certain reasons. So maybe it's time to look at other sites again.
With respect to the document that says land with potential for recreation use, at what point would that become more of a validated, you know, document in which to work from? Do we have?
Well, you can work from it now. This is just an ongoing work of the Open Space and Recreation Committee. They've been working on this for a year and a half, looking at all of the parcels that are owned
So everything
by the
that's on
town.
this list is an opportunity or not?
It's a potential option, yes. That's why we included it, yes. They just haven't voted to make their recommendations for the use
Of any of them.
Gotcha, okay.
to confirm it, but those are confirmed that they are town-owned parcels. And sometimes, you know, further research shows that maybe there's a deed restriction that needs to be looked at further, that you can only use it for open space, or that should be on there. So it should be, we just verify everything, verify it twice, and verify it the 5th time, just to make sure we're not missing it. So if we're supposed to be open space or conservation, we don't want to consider it for recreational use. So I would look at all the ones that have already been looked at. Then I would also look at that list that have not been looked at. And maybe you divide the list up and it's, you know, give everybody 2 sites and say, just do a little look into it. Go take a look at it. See what it looks like. We can also show you online, or you can go online. I can tell you exactly how to do it. You can look at the maps online. We have a great system where you can actually see who the boundaries of the parcel. You can see an aerial of it, so you can see if there are trees. You know, if you can't see everything, you can look on that as well. So if you go onto our main homepage, right on the front homepage, about 2/3 of the way down, it says maps. Yes, maps online. And if you click on that, there'll be a disclaimer just that you recognize that the boundaries that you're about to see are not legal boundaries, because that can only be done by the Registry of Deeds. So just click yes that you recognize that. And then you can search for any property. You go in on the left side, there's a find column, and you can take any one of those addresses and just put in the address. And it's amazing what you can get off of GIS. You can get the parcel, all the parcel information. You can get a butter information. You can put overlays of wetlands, because you can't build something in a wetland. You can put overlays of infrastructure. It's a really nice system. We used that when we were looking at these sites, but it's not all included in here. A lot of these sites we're more familiar with, so we didn't include it when we did our initial analysis, but it's a good thing to look at. But I would say, to answer your first question, you're right. Generally with the committee, we say, you know, we'd like to have a recommendation by this date. So I'd say you're meeting now in January. We'd like to have a recommendation by June, if that's possible. I think that's, Amy, do you see any concerns with that? I know we don't know anything about the Stanton Foundation money running out. Oh, yes.
So we don't have any immediate concerns that the funds will run out or be unavailable between now and June. Again, it's a very open-ended grant. We also don't know how the grant is directly funded. So really the sooner the better, but we don't have any information right now that, in the immediate future, anything is going to be changing with it.
So, thank you. If it was, so if you were done by June, that still means that you have to go to the Board of Selectmen, present the information to them. They're probably still going to have another public meeting on whatever the site is that's recommended to give everybody the opportunity. And again, this is an open meeting. Our recommendation to the committee is when you're getting down to a few sites that you really feel strongly about recommending, you should post the meeting, and we can help you do an outreach effort to the residents of the town, and particularly of that neighborhood, to let them know that you're considering that site and you want their input, which is what the board did when we looked at 12 Upland. They notified everybody within 500 feet of that site to come and listen to something, because you want to make sure the neighbors, the residents, the abutters are all aware that you're looking at this. You want to hear any concerns before you make your recommendation. So you want to build that in too. I mean, ideally, if you could get the recommendation to the board, by May, that gives that extra time. It's just we're trying to recognize that you're all volunteers and you're doing this at night. We were able to do it, we had people who work, full-time, and we were taking this on in addition to everything, but, we're trying to be respectful of your time as well. May would be ideal. June would probably be the latest we want to get it going. If you do it earlier, that would be great. We're not going to say not to come in earlier, but we understand. It's a challenge.
So what constitutes a final done deal here? Is it the Board of Selectmen takes a look at the recommendations that come forth? If there's no significant concerns voiced from the community, then at that point some sort of passing based on a vote that comes out of the Board of Selectmen that would then finalize that this is the path to go forward. This is the kind of the end process that how
exactly. The Board of Selectmen will have to take a vote to authorize the application to the Stanton Foundation for the grant, and with that vote will be a vote to apply for a grant for a dog park at X site. So the vote for the grant identifies the site that you're applying for. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And a vote from the Board of Selectmen like this is a simple majority vote.
Mm-hmm. Is it possible that this would also require town meeting action?
Initially, I would say it will not, because we're not putting any money into the budget per se. There's no funding going into it. Technically, under the town charter, the use, lease, control, et cetera, of all town-owned, not school-owned property falls under the town manager. So I don't believe, Ron, that you would need a town meeting. I don't think you'd need a town meeting vote. But I want to say, depending on the site, I don't believe you need one for any of the sites we looked at initially. If you were to find another site that potentially had any kind of restriction that had been placed on it by town meeting, you'd have to go back to town meeting to remove that restriction. So, possibly. I would say...
I only suggest that possibility because that would delay the process.
It would delay the process, yeah. If town meeting, in other words, if town meeting took a vote some 20 years ago to put a deed restriction on a parcel to prohibit anything from going there at all, then if that was the parcel you wanted, that would require a town meeting vote to reverse that, because town meeting put that into place. I think the application itself, Amy has put in a lot of work on this, and I want to thank her because she's really been passionate about this. And as you can see, she does a great job. She's done her homework. She's looked into it. We've also, Amy, myself, our town planner, we've looked at other dog parks. We've contacted other communities to see what works, what doesn't work. We've already started to work on potential regulations for the dog park because we don't want to wait until, we need to do this simultaneous to the work that you're doing. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we're going to be losing time. We've got to get this thing moving.
So site selection, obviously primary deliverable out of this exercise. As far as the construction budget, is that something that we're you're looking for our input into as well?
Yes. The Board of Selectmen actually specifically voted for a cost analysis to be done, and you sum it up in a good way. It's basically, what would the budget be to get this done? And to go back to something you asked too, what are all the costs that go into it? So if you were to build a 30,000 square foot dog park, it's certainly going to be less expensive than a 50,000 square foot because of the fencing.
So do we have any data sources that we can leverage to do that cost analysis based on what we may have already learned to date? Or is this start from scratch, make a lot of phone calls, trying to determine, what, those ranges may be for cost estimates?
Amy, and do you mind going back up there? I know we had done some cost estimates with our engineering, town engineer, and Amy from contacting other towns. So I'm sure we have something to give you, but a lot of specifics we may not have because it's dependent on the site. But I'll let you mention.
Yeah, just like Julia was saying, a lot of it's dependent on the site. I mean, things like fencing, we can certainly help get you information, if you know how much fencing is needed for a certain size property. A lot of our information we did get from DPW, but depending on the site, there are other things specific to the site that you might have to think of. If it's like the 5-acre parcel on Leicester Street is completely undeveloped, so if that's something that you're looking at, you would need to look into clear cutting some of the property, possibly making it buildable, putting in an access road, making sure the access road is compliable for emergency vehicles. So things like that, where you have to consider paving, cutting trees. We can certainly help you with those estimates, but it's all things that you're going to have to think about when you're looking at specific pieces of land, because one of the things we did realize is that paving is a very expensive cost. If you need to start from scratch to put in a road, to put in a very large parking space, that's going to eat up a lot of your budget. So then if you're using a piece of land that you're going to have to completely develop, then that means your park might even have to be smaller because you're putting in more of the money towards actually building an access road and building parking.
And fencing also. We found fencing very expensive. It will chew up a lot of the budget.
I understand that there'd be deltas based on quantity, types of stuff. I guess what I'm looking at is, do we have a definitive list of, parts, so to speak, SKUs or whatever you want to call them, and then from there, based on, item costs that we may have already dealt with in the past for maybe something that we've already discovered as part of the initial fact gathering process for this particular initiative, or like committee type stuff out there that maybe we use the fence guy for something else, and we go to him, we find out what's going on. And so to me, again, I'm working in my mind how long this is really going to take, and obviously if we have data sources and people to go to that are going to be able to give us some inputs based on some past experience, then that's going to obviously help with the facilitation of moving this quicker, faster.
Yep. Some of the information, as Amy said, we got from DPW based on projects that they've done. Excuse me, if they've installed fences, they can give you an estimate. We can't give SKU numbers or actual costs because these projects all have to go out to bid under the...
I understood.
So we don't have an exact...
As an example,
but yep, DPW...
Here's the list, and then from there, we got to have some sort of ranges based on some sort of input.
Yep, we can give you linear costs for road. We can give you estimated costs for each foot of fencing. We can give you estimated costs for parking lot, instructing the parking lot. We just need to know what size you're looking at to do that analysis, to give you those numbers.
So I guess what I'm hearing is we've got kind of like a couple of different groups of folks that we could be needing information from. I'm hearing DPW, I'm hearing Open Space Committee, I'm hearing maybe from how like a committee functions in general. Maybe that's a town manager / Board of Selectmen kind of, guidance, information type of thing. Would there be anyone else that you would think at this point from someone who we would potentially interface in from a data perspective that would...
Our recommendation is always to look at other communities that have done the same thing with the same grant. I think it's always important to reach out and see what experiences those communities had. Contact, Millbury just put one in, and Amy, I think you have a list in the packet of some of the other communities, but contact them, maybe divide it up. You were talking about what would the individual roles be, maybe divide up and say to everyone at the next meeting or the next 2 meetings, can you report back? Take one town, call them, ask them what was their experience, what is the size of their park, how much did it end up costing them, what were any of the obstacles that they came into. I think that's always helpful to look at a real life case as opposed to the estimates.
Sure.
But yeah, we can provide, that's what I said, any information you need, just give us some warnings so we can get it, because some of the information takes a long time to put together. So the more you can give us in advance, we can make sure that you have that information available. If some night you got to the point where you've narrowed it down to a couple of sites that you really want to do a cost analysis, but my recommendation is don't do a cost analysis on 30 sites. You'll be here for 3 years. Yeah. It's just, that's an impossible task.
Right.
Choose the priority sites that you're finding because they meet criteria, because you like the place, because you feel it's a good area that someone would want to go to with their dog. Look at those and then narrow it down and say, if we want a 20,000 square foot dog park, or 30, decide on what size you're looking at. And then the more you can give us, maybe we invite our give us in advance, and the DPW director and the assistant could come up with some figures for you and come in and come to one of your meetings and give you the information and have a chance to talk to you about how they arrived at the information. I think that's probably a good way to get started. I know, Amy, and I apologize if you said it, did we talk about going with a small park and a large park too? Is that preferable or is that a requirement?
It's preferable, definitely from a safety standpoint, to have an area for large dogs and then a separate area for small dogs. Most of the parks that have been established with the Stanton Foundation do have that in place. It's not a direct requirement. I believe it is highly encouraged from them though. The Millbury Dog Park that was created using the Stanton Foundation does have a very large area for large dogs, and they do have a slightly smaller section for small dogs. Other parks, like the unofficial Boynton Park in Worcester and then the dog park in North Grafton, they do not have that. So it is just one large open space. So you do have to take that into consideration for the safety of dogs, their handlers, whether or not you would want a large and small dog section of it.
Amy, in your preliminary work, did you run across dog parks that divide themselves into leashed and unleashed? I know that that's common to some.
So none of the parks that I've seen have leashed areas. Most of the time, they do have a rule that leashes are not allowed inside of the property. Putting a leash on a dog can sometimes change their behavior, and they can be more reactive. And it also restricts the dog, so you wouldn't want to necessarily add that fuel going into a dog park.
Yeah, I think most of the communities that have developed dog parks have done it within the last 2 or 3 years. So I think the information you get from them is current. This is obviously fairly new. The Stanton Foundation is fairly new. Most of the town managers that I've spoken to who have dog parks, some of them took up to 2 years to develop, but it's been fairly recently. So I think the information they have and they give you will be timely. And I think a lot of them are looking at some of the newer technology as far as gates and the double gates and the height of the fencing, and again looking at some of the animal behavior things that Amy's looked at too. Understanding what's going to make how a dog's going to get along, what's the best thing for them, what's the best thing as far as public safety goes with that dog getting along. It seems to us that you want to have a small dog and a large dog park. You may come back as a committee and recommend we don't do that. If we do that, I think it's worth the cost, but just keep in mind, if you don't do it, it's that one last piece of fencing you don't need. If you do it, you need that piece of fencing. It's not a deal breaker by any means at all. It just goes into your cost analysis.
Would you suggest that we also look at regulations?
I do believe that was something that the Board of Selectmen was interested in, that they wanted an idea of what people would like to see for regulations. On the town side of it, we have already spoken about some regulations that we'd like to see just to make sure that the park is safe for everybody and their pets.
We do have, we've done some research and we have regulations from a number of different parks that we're looking at. If the committee wants to take that on, we're happy to share that with you. I know the charge is more the site selection and the cost analysis, and it might be something that you want to do toward the end, maybe get the recommendation into the board for what the mission is, which is let's get a site, and then let's get the application in, and then the regulations related to that site can be something maybe the committee continues and works with us on regulations.
Is there any insurance perspective to any of this, like from a liability perspective, that to be considered here?
I believe we did speak to our insurance. The insurance would pretty much be the same.
If there's, if there's a certain amount of insurance that needs to be a part of a cost specifically for this in the event that there was an issue, and I'm not really clear whether or not you would actually need insurance, or if you're just signing that away when you go ahead and say, if you're going to use the dog park, then you're more or less you're giving up your right to do anything.
Sure. So the park would be covered by the same insurance that's covered with all the other parks in town. Something that we did discuss as part of an application for people to have a membership to use the park would be to sign a liability waiver, just for that added security. For people to understand, if you're bringing your dog to the park, you understand that there are inherent risks of allowing dogs to run loose and play together. Things can happen, and that owners do have to be responsible for their own dogs and their own dog behavior.
In terms of resources, what's available here? Are we able to put things up on the screen, by iPad, by a laptop?
Absolutely. That's why it would be nice if we can get you into the planning board room, because there are 3 or 4 screens in there that are really easy to see. If you're like me, this is going to be a little difficult to see without glasses on.
We can also get it onto this screen.
Yeah.
And we're rebuilding the school committee room as we speak with 3 monitors and system.
Okay, awesome. So yeah,
I guess it's a point of clarification. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say I have deep town municipal board experience, but in terms of like I see like this working sessions, and then I see decision making and talking about what we've learned and that type of stuff. Is this 100% open to the public? So,
pardon me, under the open meeting law, and if you want, we can make sure that we send you all a copy of it. I brought one copy just in case, but under the open meeting law, any subcommittee or any majority of any committee is considered an open meeting. So you cannot deliberate. The term is you cannot deliberate online, you can't deliberate offline, you can't get in a room and say, well, we're not really meeting and talk. If you're a majority. So 2 of you could meet and go out and look at a site, but then you can't deliberate with the rest of you privately. So if you have a committee of 7, actually 3 of you. 3 of you could meet and not be a meeting. If you want to have subcommittees and have one subcommittee look at parks that have been developed in other parts of Massachusetts, another subcommittee look at the existing sites the sites we already evaluated, and maybe those committee meetings also have to be posted. Subcommittee meetings are subject to the same open meeting law. Have to be posted, have to have an agenda, have to go through the clerk's office. Okay. So as far as working, it's sometimes better to just do smaller groups, to assign a couple people to do something and not have a meeting. Everything that's discussed has to be an open session. The subcommittee meetings don't need, no meeting needs to be televised, but the board has always asked that all meetings that can be televised should be, but it's not always possible for a subcommittee meeting, but they do have to be posted.
So I just wanted to follow up on some of the questions that have been raised regarding the Board of Selectmen. When we talked about this, yes, your charge is to find the best site for a dog park, but what we had also hoped and what we discussed was some of these questions that arose after the fact are discussed amongst your board. Specifically, do we want you to formulate regulations? No, but it would be helpful for you to talk about them, talk about the regulations that town administration has talked about. That way, when residents come in and talk to you, or they come before the Board of Selectmen, we're prepared with those answers. You know, we don't want someone to come in and say, do your research on, let me back up. Have you do the research on dog parks, so that when someone comes into the Board of Selectmen and says, I don't want barking dogs 24 hours a day. We want to be able to give factual information of what actually happens at a dog park. And dogs, socialize and play together, but it's not dropping dogs off like at a doggy daycare that they're barking all day. So it's our hope that when you come to the Board of Selectmen, it's more of an outreach process, an education process, so that people are comfortable when we're ready to take that vote on the site. People are comfortable that they're saying, wow, a dog park, just what we need. Mm-hmm. And again, there will be a member of the Board of Selectmen attending your meetings as a liaison. Like you haven't organized tonight, we haven't determined that person, but at the next meeting, we can work together.
So now the chair and vice chair.
And as far as the next meeting date, I need to just check with the clerk's office. And then do we have all of your email addresses? Does the clerk's office have all of your?
Yeah, mine, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we can email you the next Wednesday that's available. We'll email you a couple, and then she can work with you to set up the next meeting date. After that, it becomes easy because then you'll see all the dates and you can choose whatever dates. The first one's the toughest. Yeah, chair and vice chair, so that agenda will have to be submitted. We're happy to submit that agenda for you since you don't have a chair or vice chair, so maybe what we should do right now is just, if you want to let me know what you want to discuss at the next meeting, or let's talk about it so we can get that. Once we get the dates, we'll be able to post the agenda for you. Mm-hmm. So the very first item should be your vote for chair, vice chair, and secretary. That's number one. Then after that, the chair can take over the meeting and go through all the other agenda items. I don't know, based on tonight's discussion, do you want to add an item on there for the next time, or do you want to even make some assignments now so you come back the next time with some more information to maybe have everyone, maybe tonight, decide who's going to go look at the sites that have already been looked at, and maybe an item on here could be at your next meeting that whoever went and looked at site number 1 or site number 2 comes back and reports and said, yeah, I saw it, I have a concern about this, or I think it's great, we should pursue. Do you want to do that now? Will you be ready to, in the next couple of weeks, go out and take a look at some of these sites?
I think because of the time restraints that we have, like having recommendation by May or June timeframe, I think it would be better if we can do that for the next meeting. Have somebody take 1 or 2 or 3 sites, and then come back at the next meeting and give the recommendation on those sites.
So I can put on there report from members on site visits?
Yep.
Because you're not taking any vote or anything at that point, you're just coming back, so that I can do that, okay. Anything else you want to put on here? Do you want to put on here discussion of reaching out to other communities? Is, at that point, you want to divide it up at the next meeting?
I think we need some sort of
line item of what we need to do, and then from there, who is going to do what? What's the best forum for which it to happen? Is it a subcommittee need, or is it an individual who's just going to be tasked for it? So that we know who's doing what, and that we can communicate that amongst ourselves, so that we can then have a check and balance when we meet that's been done or it's not been done. Because right now, it would feel like we're just kind of, a deer in the headlights without it.
Well, I would, turn to the committee. We've showed you all the sites and discussed some of the things the deliverables that need to be done and the things to get you there. How do you want to proceed with that as a committee? Nicole?
I was even thinking maybe just looking at a handful of those, not all of them, as it might be too overwhelming, even if we were to split up the already assessed sites. So maybe looking at 3 to 5 of those sites that have already been evaluated by the town.
How many sites do we have already?
30.
How many?
There were 12, I think.
12 that-
11 if you
So
take
I
out
think you'll have 11.
First cut.
So it's 11.
So even just half, if we were to cut the list in half and look at those sites.
Okay.
I don't know if that'd be more manageable for people.
I mean, if we're meeting in a month, I think we can look at all of them. If we're meeting in a week,
Well, that's true, too.
then we'd have to cut that down, so.
I might recommend, if I can, and again, we're trying to give the committee a little guidance, but we don't want to certainly tell you what to do, and that's what I'm trying to find a balance.
Yeah.
My recommendation would be, and this is what we do internally, divide up the tasks. I mean, the tasks are, you need to look at other communities and see what they've done. You need to look at the information we've given you and see if any of these sites now rise up for consideration. And you need to look at the list of sites that haven't been looked at and see if any of those sites potentially should be considered.
Yeah.
So maybe with a committee of 7, you ask 2 people to call, a few communities. Don't set a number, just say call other communities from the list on the Stanton Foundation, see who you can get in touch with, and get some information and report back at the next meeting.
Okay.
And then those 2 people decide which communities they're going to call, and so then you're not both calling them.
Right.
Then maybe you have 3 people who say, we're going to go out and look at the 11 sites. That's 3 sites a person. So 3 of you each take 3 to 4 sites, and you go take a look at the sites, or 4 of you take the sites. And then maybe the last person starts looking at the list of sites that haven't been looked at. Take a look at it. Really, if the site's not large, it's not too big, you're going to cross it off.
Right.
It's got to be a minimal size. You're going to know from looking at that if it's off. Chances are you're not going to end up with too many additional sites.
You might want to consider meeting again in another 2 weeks and just have an agenda item, committee assignments, under one of your tasks, and then you'll have a chairman in 2 weeks. You can say, like, 2 of you are going to go look at these sites, and 2 of you are going to call these assignments. So I think that committee assignments, individual committee member assignments should come out in the open meeting law.
So that's something you can do at the next meeting, or you can discuss tonight if anyone wants to volunteer to do something. You can put it on there as a report from that member for your next meeting.
Are there any other questions that need to be asked other than the questions that are already asked in the assessments that we have, like public water, public sewer? Did you come across anything that hadn't been asked that we need to find? Because these assessments have already been done, so. Why
Can I
would we
take a
do
look
it
at your
again?
packet for a minute? I'm sorry.
If we're looking at the town assessments, I don't understand why we're looking at it all over again. If here's the answers to what we need,
Well,
what we
because
don't need. So is
looking at
there
it again.
more? I'm asking you, is there more? Are there
Well, and I
more
would say
questions than
you're
that?
looking at it again because some of the sites may be viable sites, but they were put aside because another site rose to the top. Now that site's no longer in consideration, we've got to go back to the secondary sites and look again.
Okay.
So again, I would look at this again. Some of the sites were also looked at because we were looking at a larger dog park. And then in conversation with the Fur Friends said that they actually thought a smaller park would be something. So some of the sites we had initially looked at and said there is no room, such as Lemansky, there was no room to put something large. There's a very small area there. So that's why they need to be revisited. So this question, is there 30,000 square feet available? Is there 20,000 square feet available? Is there 15? You know, that might be something that you can reduce down. I think questions that we weren't looking at the time, which is why we had the public meeting, was to look at proximity of abutters. You know, nearly every site in a residential area is going to have abutters. So the question is, are there natural buffers there to the abutters? Would buffers have to be put in?
And Julie, if I could just add to that, certainly since you guys live in the community, you're going to have additional information about some of these places that we didn't have offhand. So if you're looking at a town-owned piece of property that's in your precinct, maybe you have more information about it, and it wasn't directly something that we had looked at. Like if it's currently a park in town, you might know, is it underused? Are there people visiting it? Are there every weekend hordes of children playing at the park or games going on? Things that we don't necessarily know because we might not live in that area, we might not frequent it. So definitely having the resident perspective, there might be things that you'll see on here, or additional things that aren't on our assessment, but having input as a resident, you might have a little bit more information.
That's a really good point, because the Board of Selectmen, again, they're going to want to have a public meeting on whatever site, and the residents should be consulted and spoken to, and if you can get that process done as part of your analysis, if you're going to find a site that's overwhelmingly opposed, it's not going to be a site that's going to work.
Right.
So that's something that should be on there now, because we've changed the process a little. We weren't doing that initially. We were just trying to get to a site and then have the public meeting.
Okay. The very fact that we will be looking at them in winter will give us a different perspective on some of these sites.
Yeah, because
If
there's trees in between the property, now that there's no leaves on them, the sound's going to travel further than
No, that's
in
a
the
really
summer.
good point. You know, you might, like I said, you could invite residents of a neighborhood to come out to your meetings. You could also, you know, go out and, you know, talk to some of the residents and say, if this area were to be a dog park, would you support it? What do you think? You may find out that what you think is a perfect site is going to have absolutely no support from that neighborhood. And again, it's a very difficult balance to achieve. We want to make sure that we're doing what's right for the community at large, but we also have to be sensitive to the needs of and the impacts on neighborhoods. And that goes back to actually Doreen's point about noise. You know, a lot of, Nicole, you were at the meeting, a lot of people came out and said, dog parks are loud. They're not. Right. They're not loud. Dog parks, actually dogs that are not on leashes, statistics will show you that they don't. But you know, we had looked at that, Amy had looked at that, so anything additionally you find to help that, you know, that would help when you have meetings with neighbors, and neighbors are going to come and they're going to ask, you know, what's the impact on me, and how late is it going to be open, and am I going to hear the dogs, and that's why I like going to towns, talking to other towns that have, you know, what are your issues? Now that that park's in place, are you having issues? What do the neighbors feel? Is it, if it's in, you know, I'd make sure you look at dog parks that are both surrounded by homes and dog parks that are not, because there's two different issues. Dog parks surrounded by homes, you need to look at the impacts on the immediate abutters, if there are any. Dog parks that are in more secluded areas, you need to look at the users of those parks, and are they comfortable going into a secluded area? Because we've been told by several people that they would not go to an area that has no houses around them, that they would be concerned going early morning or late in the evening by themselves. So I think it's important to look at both aspects, and you know, none of us will know what the right answer is, but you need to know what the questions are going to be. And those questions are going to be, what's the impact on the neighbors, and will the users of the park actually go to an area that's secluded?
Can I ask another question around like tools? So what I see is, you're setting a bunch of people off to go do some data validation, data collection, okay? Is everybody just going to go put that in their notebook and then we're going to get here, we're going to try to spend the time of how to piece that all together to be able to compare it in some sort of logical way? I mean, is there any type of ability to do like a cloud storage where you put something up there and people can go ahead and access the same documents and then put their updates to it in some sort of a standardized format so that, we're not doing things in 400 different types of documents and forms and stuff, and then we got to spend a whole lot of time trying to recalibrate all that into one thing.
We can talk to our IT director and see if he can build the committee an access portal that's only, I say only available to the committee, but ultimately everything is a public record. And I just want to point out the public records law just changed, and as of January 1, it's become even far more restrictive. So make sure everything is public record. But yeah, we can see if he can build an access that each of you can get through and put your information on.
Just data and
Yeah, I guess what
It's just record storage.
Okay, we have a list of assessment questions, requirements that we want to be able to capture with respect to a given site. And it would be really handy to be able to see in one view, one sort of dashboard view, here's these 10 sites and here's how they kind of, match up against it, as opposed to, what do you got over there versus, well, what do you got over here? And we've been here for years, if that's the kind of approach that we use.
I mean, and the other alternative is, what we do, we had an Excel chart, and everyone working on their different aspects of it had an Excel chart, and then we merged them all together.
Yeah. I guess the other thing, I'm not taking for granted that everyone here is, a superpower user of Excel or PowerPoint or Word or Google Docs or anything like that. So I guess kind of making sure that everybody's comfortable with the forum of how we're going to work together is important to know.
Yeah, and that's, again, I turn to the committee members for how you want to do that. If you
I think the first, at least for the initial go-round of these sites, we're not going to have much trouble as a committee eliminating some of the sites that don't offer as much as the others. I think there'll be a lot of easy sites to eliminate immediately. Once you've pared that list down to a reasonable number, then you can look for more exotic ways to compare them, perhaps. But, I don't think that from the very start that if there are 12 sites or 15 sites or 25 sites, that many of these will have the potential to be chosen as the final site. I think maybe we learned that from the previous experience.
And that's exactly what happened with us. We started with a lot of sites, and just because certain sites had far more qualities than other sites, some of the other sites fell off the list. But again, it has to be done again in a different light.
So to follow up on that point, I guess what I would suggest is we need one document that outlines what our criteria is for selection, so that we're all working from the same sheet of music, so to speak, and then we can go ahead and parse out, what number of locations can each person go take a look at. You're then responsible for going ahead and filling that out, and then we can see how the aggregated data begins to look. And then in some cases, I'm sure we might say, all right, well, maybe we need all of us to go out and take a look at these 3 or 4 more desirable sites, because now we've systematically weeded out maybe a half a dozen type of thing. But I think the key is if everybody goes out there and starts wasting time in circles, and we're not all looking for the same thing. And I kind of, again, I've not read through every I and T crossed in this, but I see, in my opinion, that there's probably 2 documents here that need to be pulled from in order to establish that criteria document that then allows us to go out and evaluate the different locations more effectively.
Is that something we put on our agenda for our next meeting along with our committee assignments?
I'll say I'll go off and I'll create that, and I'll give it to you to go ahead and then provide feedback on it. And I say we throw it up on a screen, and let's iterate so that we're not talking about this over 6 months.
Right.
But let's throw it up on the screen. Here's what we got. Okay, let's make a few field changes, colors, whatever you want to do. And then from there we've got a final blueprint, and then we move forward with utilizing that for evaluation of the locations.
So do you want to call it discussion of criteria for evaluation of each site?
I would say it's more than that. It's discussion, finalization of criteria so that we don't leave it open-ended and,
Right.
we're talking about it for
We
weeks.
can get rid of a lot of things on the list, or not a lot, but you can get rid of the places that don't, even if they have one
You can pare it
nix on
down.
them, well, this one has one nix, but that one doesn't, so we're gonna, go with that. So we could, eliminate a lot of this, stuff that we don't have to research at all. But that would be great.
I feel like one of the big issues that's going to come up when we're looking at site analysis is the space, the issue of space and what is ideal and what has been the best practice in previous communities. So I'm wondering if I may put you on the spot while we have the opportunity for expertise, Amy, if you could just speak briefly to what you feel is best practice in an ideal world for space allocation for dog park.
I mean, ideally, I would stick with the Stanton Foundation average, which is about 37,000 square feet. As close to an acre would be preferable if you're going to be doing a large dog and small dog park. And again, the small dogs don't necessarily need the same amount of space as a large dog because small dogs, smaller legs, don't really need as much space. But really, an acre would be, that's kind of what we were looking at for like the Cherry. And again, like Julie mentioned before, our maps online on the town website, you can pull up what's called an assessor's card for each property, which will give you the size of the lot. So it will tell you in acreage or square feet how big the property is. And it will also show you an outline of the specific property and the area that you're looking at. That's something that we utilize a lot and something that you could certainly use to help you because you might go onto a property and it might, while you're standing there, look very big, and then when you see how big it actually is, it might not be something that is really workable to build a dog park, because then you also have to think maybe you're looking at an acre and a half of land that's available, but that's not necessarily an acre and a half of a park, because then you do have to have parking. You might need to build an access point. So there are things that you have to consider when you're looking at that number of the size of the lot.
Great, thank you.
So right now I have, excuse me, for your agenda item, vote for chair, vice chair, secretary, committee assignments, discussion and finalization of criteria for evaluation of each site. How about if I add on there, schedule next meeting, because at the end you always need to schedule next meeting.
Well, I would actually try to take that one step further. If it's, instead of trying to go, session to session, let's try to be a little bit more, future oriented, and let's try to get out, 6-7 meetings on the calendar.
That's what we recommend,
Right,
but
that'd be
if you
great.
put schedule next meeting, then you can schedule 10 of them.
Okay.
And then, because it's the first meeting, I'm happy
I would
to...
also, just to throw in, I think it should be preliminary schedule, because I don't know if everybody's going to be able to sit here and say, okay, that date 100% works, 100% works. Might be some check and balance on that, but I think we need a baseline to start out from.
And I'll prepare some minutes and get them to you so you can look at them. Again, whoever ends up taking the minutes, basically the minutes just need to be of the category of minutes, just a summary of the discussion that you have. And specific if you have a vote. So if you have a vote, it's who made the motion for a vote, who seconded it, and what the vote was. 4-3, 7-0. That needs to be specific. You can put in there, committee discussed options for criteria and came up with the attached list. And then the minutes have to include the attachments of anything that was handed out. So like I said, I'll do the first one for tonight, and then from that point forward, the secretary would do it. And you can see the format. It's fairly easy.
Could I add also, I think that we discussed reporting from other local dog parks. I think that might be helpful to do now before we come up with and finalize our criteria. So I would volunteer to contact some local communities that do have the dog parks. I don't know if any other member would be willing to also help me out with that. I just think that would be something good to do beforehand, before finalizing.
Great.
I think it's a good idea. The only thing I would say is to ensure that we have alignment on a prerequisite is what are we asking?
What are we asking, right? We haven't really discussed about, what we're asking.
You may not know what we're asking or what we should be asking until you actually speak to
somebody,
whose
right?
hands have been
already
dirty
been there,
from
right.
the process.
Well, and then you have a contact. So if we need to have follow-up questions, you have a
follow-up
relationship.
conversation, right?
I would agree with the point that you're not necessarily going to vet out every, possible question going in there, but I think, in terms of respecting the person's time that you're going to talk for, being a little organized always helps in the front end. So I would say we don't necessarily have to have a book and a Bible to go in there with, but we should probably go in there with some 6 or 7 consistent talking points that are going to allow us to then bring data back that's consistent that we can then kind of learn something from. So if we think we can bang that out right now and say boom, 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 then I'm all forward with going forward with your idea to do that. And I guess, is there anything, I looked at this document about the kind of dog pack comparison. Is this the only data that we have with respect to that comparison on different dog parks?
So that's only the information that we prepared. We were looking specifically for that information. Most of those parks have websites, they have friends of groups, so they have information out there that you can kind of look at without even necessarily getting somebody on the phone, where they might have, information on the size of the park, how many members that they have. They'll have pictures that you can look at to kind of get an idea of what their parks look like. Also, the Stanton Foundation website does have information about all of their established parks. They do have statistics on there. They have, how many parks have multiple entrances, what are different amenities they have. Do they have benches? Do they have water for just dogs? Do they have water for people and dogs? What's the average size? Because something that you'll notice is, yes, their average is 37,000 square feet, but then when you get closer to the Boston area, where there are more parks, but they're also smaller parks. So a lot of the information is out there. It's just a matter of how you want to look at it, how you want to put it together to help your process.
So I'm adding to the agenda, just a report from members on outreach to other communities with dog parks. Again, the item just needs to be the basic of what you're talking about. It doesn't need to be what you're talking, the details.
All right, so getting back to that is what are we asking them?
Right.
We're just asking kind of general related things like, can you give me a sense of, what worked well with respect to your process moving forward, what didn't work out well, what were some of the challenges? Are we looking for more specific data points like how big was this versus how small was this? What do we think along those lines?
A mixture of both.
Yeah, just asking pros and cons of what their process was now that their parks are completed. What's their feedback as far as putting their plans together?
What issues are they having now that their park is done?
Right.
So lessons learned with respect to the process they went through, and any lessons learned based on what's come out of it, the execution part of it, now that it's in play.
And if you can, I would even go further and to talk to the people who frequent it, talk to the neighbors who live around it, find out how they feel about the process and how they feel about it now.
As Amy said, we got some great information from the websites. A lot of them do have friends of, and they have discussion groups, so you can actually see some of the comments from people who've used them. We noticed a lot of comments from people saying, really like it, but there weren't any benches. I got tired and there were no benches for humans to sit on. And a lot of people go with their dogs and they just don't have the stamina they need to sit. And there were plenty of dog toys, but no resting spots. I saw that consistently in some of the comments. But you can see a lot from looking at their interactive websites because you see the feedback from the neighbors in the community. Some people, wrote and said it got very muddy. We had a spell of rain there. I don't know why at one point these postings were there, but it must have been during an extreme wet spell, which we haven't had one of those in quite some time. And the comment was about how the surface was very muddy, and it made it very difficult and slippery, and people weren't happy with the material that was used. So you might want to also ask about how is the material holding up? What kind of material do they use? Is it grass? Is it dirt? Is it mulch? Is it some other substance?
I think those are good points. I guess the other thing I would add is I think cost, getting some cost data, ballpark is probably important because what I've heard from the selectmen is we need to supply things for data, and one of the sensitivities that I've been hearing is that we don't want to pay more than we have to.
Right.
So I think getting some sense of cost structure around some of the different variables that were here will be helpful in gaining so that we can use that data to support any findings or recommendations that we may have.
And I would also recommend possibly looking at the other parks, how active the park actually is. So that was a concern that we noticed when we did bring up our recommendation, was that people in the community were weary that there were going to be 20 dogs at the park at a time from the time the park opened until night. And people that live in close-knit neighborhoods, they didn't necessarily want that high volume of dogs and people around their homes and neighborhoods. From what we've seen, that's not really the norm, that there's usually high points and low points, similar with children parks in the area, but to, speak to those specific parks to see, is that consistently what they're seeing, that there are peak hours, but, maybe there's only not more than 5 dogs in the park at a time. But then you'd also have to kind of look at, is the population similar in the community to Auburn, the number of dogs in the community as well. Because then that also goes to how big of a park you need. Somebody might have built, a 3-acre park, but if there's only 3 dogs in the park at a time, is that really money well spent necessarily?
So just to take an output from what she just said, I think number of dogs that are in these communities is probably a good parameter to understand. I think what I heard previously that we think we had, 2,300 dogs in Auburn that we knew about legally, I guess.
That were licensed, And town clerks would have that, or should have that number available if, because especially if you're speaking with a Friends of group, they might not have that information offhand, but the town clerk of that area should.
I think it might be important also to ask if they've had any issues with safety issues, because we did hear at the meeting from several people that these dog parks aren't safe. Are there known problems with dogs biting other dogs, or dogs biting people, or dogs escaping? That was a big question. How are you going to ensure the dog doesn't escape? Well, if you have a certain height fence and you have a double gate.
Right, you need a double gate, definitely.
Questions like that, it helps to hear from other communities. Right. We can provide the answers, you can provide the answers, but unless you can say, well, look, we've spoken to communities and this is what they're telling us, it helps enforce the information. Yeah.
Just a curiosity question. Any data or information with respect to breed restrictions? Because I know for some residents, certain breeds that, don't necessarily have a negative connotation to it. I'll always say that it's more the owner than the dog, but unfortunately that's just not how everybody looks at things. Is there anything like that that's ever...
So I haven't seen any breed restrictions at any of the parks in Massachusetts. It's actually a Massachusetts state law that you cannot have certain breed restrictions, and especially if it's going to be a town-owned property, that should carry over. But again, with certain rules and regulations for the park in place, non-specific to breeds, that would help, manage any concerns people would have for safety. Because like you were saying, a lot of it's not necessarily the dog. So making sure that the owners are following the rules and regulations, and that's something that we were looking at with having a membership to use the park is a way to really be able to enforce the rules. So that's something that you could also ask the dog parks or friends of groups that you speak with is, do they have a membership? Is the park open to the public? Is it only open to the residents, and how do they manage that?
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm playing by the rules here. So I noticed that she's making a lot of notes. I've got a couple of notes here. If we want to be able to move forward, trying to standardize what she has and what some of our other ideas are sooner than later will help us move forward. Are we able to kind of create that in just a simple email, blast it? Are we able to create a distribution list amongst ourselves, or is that not?
Nope.
Good.
Nope. Can you and I get together? Because we're just two people?
Divvy up the, yes.
And you can come in and provide a report to the board in writing and hand it out to all the members.
So you and I could go through and make a list of what you and I would be asking specifically. That way we're not like just asking a bunch of random questions and a
pick
bunch
which
of...
park and communities we want to contact too.
Great.
And then whatever
And then we
you
can split
write
it up
you
between the
can
two of us.
distribute at the next
Okay.
meeting.
Right. Super.
Very good.
That works.
Anything else suggested to ask the other existing parks? I think we got a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of times, I think
I think we could like get it down to like 10
as
questions.
you start talking to them, they'll start telling you things too that you might not ask.
Start writing
They'll
notes
just say,
about
what
just
else? What
random
can you tell
stuff.
me? What
Right.
should I know?
Yep.
Is there anything you want me? You think I should?
What's your worst case
bring back?
scenario? Right.
You might want to ask them what other uses are on the abutting properties.
Yep.
In other words, is it plunked down into a park? And what are the uses of that park besides the dog park?
Right.
That's a good question, Ron, because some of the groups that we've spoken to said that it's not favored to have a dog park that's in close proximity to a playground.
No, it's not.
Because the dogs see the children and they hear the
Small,
and the dogs get
some
too
dogs
excited.
have small breed or
So that's a
small
really good
animal
question.
drive, and little children are small animals.
Yeah. So if
So yeah.
you're hearing that, and Amy had looked into this too, it's not ideal to have a park right next to a playground. If there's a buffer, and there can always be a buffer, but again, that's going to go to your cost.
Right.
Just keep in mind, if there shouldn't be a playground there, then you need to look at some kind of buffer to eliminate that visual sight line. Should it be near a ball field? And again, for the same reason of the playground, is there something? Is there a reason to not put it near a ball field?
Right.
You had found some information on the playgrounds too. I think.
Yeah, and I mean, definitely by looking at other parks, other dog parks in the state, you will see that some towns did build a dog park into an already established park complex similar to Pappas. So, maybe picking a couple of those specifically to speak to as well to see if they're having any issues with small children interactions or any issues with the games, because you do have to consider a dog in a park might be more reactive to the higher activity level around them. So if every Saturday there's a baseball game going on and that's also going to be a peak time for the dog park, then you're probably going to have dogs barking more so than they would
Normally,
without a game or something like that going on, or even just little kids going up to a fence and sticking their fingers in could cause more liability issues and more incidences at the park than if it was further away from things like that.
Right.
Anything else you want me to put on? All right. So this is what we're walking away with on town side. Check on potential for cloud storage. So could there be a place that you could data
Put a
dump
document.
and not talk about it, just put it there, and then you can all see whatever you find. Available meeting dates in town hall. Get those meeting dates to you so you can select your next meeting. Prepare minutes and get those to you, but in time for your next meeting, and post the next meeting. And then the agenda for the next meeting is the vote for the chair, vice chair, secretary, the minutes, the report from members on the outreach to other communities, committee assignments, discussion and finalization of criteria for evaluation of each site, and schedule next meetings.
Okay.
I
I just have one question, which I think was asked earlier. I know people are getting antsy to go, and I apologize. Could you quick go over what the expected roles are for the chair, the vice chair, and the secretary, just so that we know if we want to run for these things, what we're signing up for?
Yeah, generally, and Doreen could probably speak better to it than I, because she has been the chair of the Board of Selectmen for a number of years, and now she's been the vice chair. But we do follow, in general, Robert's rules. Most committees in town use that, so the chair would be responsible for, again, developing the agenda, but like tonight, develop the agenda with the members. It's not, but it is the chair's agenda, so the chair has the opportunity to change that agenda and submit it. Ron knows from all his experience with boards, the chair files the agenda, posts the meeting, unless he says to the secretary or the vice chair, can you do it? The chair calls on members to keep the conversation going orderly. The chair would say, let's go to this item, and then, you should follow Robert's rules and, raise your hand, and the chair would say yes, yes, yes. So not everyone's talking at once and tries to recognize everybody. The chair decides if anyone in the audience should be recognized, or if it's just an open meeting but no public discussion. The item's not up for public discussion, it's up for the committee discussion. The vice chair generally helps the chair, if that's fair enough to say, that if the chair needs coverage at a meeting, or the chair would like the vice chair to do the minute posting, and the secretary would be responsible for taking the minutes and providing them to the clerk. Now again, the minutes, once the minutes are done, they go back to the committee for a vote. The committee looks at it, says, nope, this didn't happen, we need to add this is important. And then once the committee votes to approve the minutes, then they get submitted to the clerk.
I just wanted to follow up on what Julie just said about the chair's role. What's really important is making sure that the chair has a valid motion on the floor, that it's a legitimate motion, that it's been seconded, that there's proper discussion, and members know what they're voting on. So that's a very important role of the chairman, to ensure that there's a proper motion on the floor, that it's properly seconded, there's discussion, and then calling for the vote. So the chair has to understand what a proper motion is.
And again, the chair, would make sure the next meeting is all set, but if you get that done at your next meeting, that eliminates that step. You're going to try to get some tentative dates. It's up to the chair, if, let's say you had a snowstorm that night, then the chair would contact, each member. Again, the chair can send an email to everybody saying the meeting has been canceled, but the chair can't send an email saying the meeting's been canceled. When would you all like to have it? Because then you start deliberating. So the chair can say the meeting's been canceled and the next meeting date is this. That's a statement. You're not deliberating, you're not discussing. The key, just keep in mind, don't deliberate.
Right.
So that's what the chair responsibilities, and vice chair just to help out. And again, the chair's not always going to be able to make it. Maybe the chair gets caught in traffic or at his job or her job and can't get here in time, and the meeting needs to start, so the vice chair starts the meeting until the chair gets here. Any other insights on chair, vice chair?
No, I mean, it's, there's certainly, like Julie announced at the beginning of the meeting, it's an open meeting law requirement that you announce that this meeting is being recorded, and is there anyone else who's also recording that meeting? That's just something that you can, when you have a chair, the chair keeps as a note for him or herself. But you have to make that statement, or someone can file a complaint with the Attorney General's office.
I just got a couple of quick logistical type things. Are we able to share contact information here or amongst ourselves? Because I'm not familiar with everybody's name here, as I'm sure as everybody's else. So is there...
Absolutely. What you might want to do is the clerk actually has everybody's email information, but you might want to also get phone numbers. So what you might want to do tonight is just pass a piece of paper around, put your name, your phone number, and your email address, and then we can run a copy and get it to all of you.
Thank you.
With respect to the meetings that we have, is there any, duration that we should plan for? Just to kind of...
Totally up to you. When you're tired, you've had enough, you can adjourn.
Depending on your agenda, some meetings may go longer, how you set your agenda to. And then if you want to go through 12 sites and know that it's going to be.
In general, many short are better than one that is too long to keep your attention.
Right. I think, it's just a general rule of thumb is to set a period of time for that meeting and try to stick to it. If you don't do that, it could go on and on and on and on, and you're trying to get through your agenda. So generally, what you might want to do is say, let's try to keep all meetings to 90 minutes. Or I'm just throwing that out there. And then, get it done in an hour and a half. And then you might say, you know what, the next meeting, we really have a lot to do this next meeting. Your next meeting may not be that long, but your meeting after that, when you've made your committee assignments, you may say, you know what, everybody, let's plan on meeting from, 6 to 8:30, and, everybody can plan for that. But I think it's always best to try to have a goal for how long that meeting is, because it can, it can quickly get away from you.
Meeting management 101. With respect to the roles, how does that work? Is if one person raises their hand, they win it that way. If there's multiple people that want it, you say a few words about yourself. I'm just again curiosity questions.
Speeches.
Well, if someone wants it, let's say I want to be chair. So I say, I'd like to be considered for the chair. And somebody else says, yeah, I'd like to be considered too. So at the next meeting, someone makes a motion for me to consider me for the chair. Someone seconds it, and then use the chair. Then we say, would anyone else like to be considered? And let's say you do. And then you take a roll call vote. But the committee votes on it. Right. The committee votes on the chair and vice chair. Somebody nominates, someone seconds the nomination, say, is there any discussion? And then the committee votes.
Well, that part's easy. I'm just trying to get back to, okay, if there's 2 or 3 people that they want a certain role, and none of us know each other from Adam in terms of our background or whatever. Again, I don't see this being a long, drawn-out process, but...
Yeah, it's under a discussion after it's seconded. So you can say a few words, like, very familiar with Robert's Rules of Order, I've been a chairman, I understand the meeting law.
No tweeting between meetings.
So I think, you make a good point. Someone has an opportunity, because you don't know each other, to just say, look, here's what I think I can bring to the table. I understand open meeting law, or I understand, and I'm comfortable with Robert's rules. I've been the chair of other committees. I've been on a committee. Those are important factors. I have the time to do it. Same thing with the secretary. Look, I don't want to take a lead role in it, but I'm happy to take the minutes because I'm contributing.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll adjourn the meeting then at 8:05, and we'll be in touch on next meeting dates and all that. And really, if anyone has any questions in the meantime, please, don't hesitate. Call me. Call Amy. We're happy to help in the interim. Thanks, and thank you very, very much for volunteering. We're excited about it.